driveways, feather in and work, where we're forced to sit, knock on doors, ring doorbells, and sit down with folks and negotiate in a friendly way what we're going to do on those transitions 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 feet into their property with no authority to do so. So during the height of a construction project, as these transitions move through, and we're just simply trying to remedy a situation, town meeting structure hamstrings us. We'd be delayed by 6 months to come to a spring town meeting to seek permission to get a right of entry or an easement or permission to do that without the proper documentation. There are dozens of projects that we do over the course of the year, whether they're water mains, stormwater work that we find ourselves needing to get into people's backyards, transition works on our construction projects. There are things where there are developments. I can think of one that's on the books right now, the Temple project, where the stormwater system from the town finds its way transitioning back into a stormwater management area on private property, and we need an easement for that. To secure those types of friendly easements, secure, not take them by adverse possession, not take them by eminent domain, but to negotiate a reasonable situation that's acceptable to the parties, ought not to come back to town meeting and be hamstrung 6 months at a time for spring town meeting or till October town meeting. And that's the purpose for this. And I tell you, it's done routinely, and it should be done every single year as a renewed article.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else? Ms. Agostino, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Prior to asking my question, I just wanted to remind you we had homework, and I hope you'll collect it before the last question or the last article, so everyone doesn't, right, for the Master Emily Ennis's homework. The question, the chairperson of the Board of Selectmen just mentioned that throughout the article, they changed the word to accepted. However, in the third line from the bottom, they did not. It says acquired. So I would ask if it was the intent to change that to accepted instead of acquired also, and if so, if it be a friendly motion.
Town Council Flynn, you're recognized for the purpose of addressing the point raised by the town meeting member.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, in the second, to answer that question, the word acquired is appropriate in that context because this applies to easements that may have been acquired in the past as opposed to prospectively. It certainly applies to easements accepted, but the situation that could arise is there could be an old water easement or sewer easement that is no longer being used by the town, and it might impede development in the, for example, in the situation that Mr. Lynch had described. It might impede an ongoing project. This would give the town of Milton the authority, the Board of Selectmen, the authority to abandon or relocate that easement. That easement may have been acquired 40 years ago by an eminent domain taking or by a purchase or some consideration. So there are examples where easements that have been acquired may need to be relocated or abandoned. In my opinion, the word acquired in the third line from the bottom is appropriate. It's a different situation, and the word accept would not fully cover the intended purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. One minute. Ms. Agostino, you all set? All right, so Dr. Shea, our rules say that we don't recognize a person for the second time while someone's waiting, but I'm not sure that she is, so I will recognize you if Mrs. Agostino is comfortable with that.
My question, Richard Shea, town meeting member, precinct 9. My question, I have really two questions. My first question is, where does the authority lie for property that has to be acquired with this article? Who has the authority?
Mr. Flynn, you're recognized.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, this article doesn't address acquisition of property. Town meeting needs to authorize the town of Milton to buy, purchase, take by eminent domain property. So that's why, one of the reasons why the warrant committee, one of the reasons why the word acquired was changed to accept was explained by the chairman of the Board of Selectmen. So the short answer to the question is, this does not change the fact that under Massachusetts law, you, town meeting, need to approve an acquisition of property by the town of Milton, whether it's a purchase, paying money for it, or taking it by eminent domain.
My second question was thinking ahead, for example, with the fire station. If the fire station wanted to be put in the DPW yard, center of town, the exact center of town, as a matter of fact, how would that property be acquired? How would it be accepted? Or if we were running lines up to that
I
newly...
think the short answer is that town's already owned by, that property's already owned by the town of Milton.
Well, the people own it.
But how, maybe your question is more intended to say, if its use were to change, how would that happen? Is that a fair?
How would that happen? Yeah. Who owns it?
So in other
Who
words, if the
accepts
fire
it and who purchases it?
Mr. Flynn, you're recognized.
If the question refers to privately owned property, then town meeting would have to approve the town of Milton buying the property or taking it by eminent domain. If you're talking about property that's presently owned by the town of Milton, but it's used for some purpose other than a fire purposes, a fire station, town meeting would have to approve the change in use of that property from whatever its present use is by the town of Milton to a fire station, and that would require a two-thirds vote of town meeting in either case.
So again, just for clarity, because I think this would help Dr. Shea, if a fire station were to then be located at the DPW yard, would that require the approval of a two-thirds vote of town meeting?
Yes.
So I thought. Thank you. Do you wish to be recognized? All set. Okay. And now, I think we're going to hear the, oh, excuse me, we have one more person waiting to be recognized? Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Hyson Critchlow, Precinct 10. My question is tonight, I rise to ask this question tonight because I have an easement in my backyard, and I often want to plant a flower bed there. And my husband told me I could not do so because it belongs to the town. It's an easement and belongs to the town, and I could not build a flower bed there. So where does that put me with this article?
I don't think it's related to this at all. But I think Mr. Lynch just could probably address your interest in a flower bed. Mr. Flynn, you recognize.
Mr. Moderator, town meeting members, if it's an existing easement, if there's no proposed change or relocation of it, this article wouldn't change it at all. What you can do with the easement depends upon the terms of the easement, but if town meeting votes this recommendation as amended, it would not affect an existing easement unless there was a proposal to move it, change it, relocate it, alter it in some fashion.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you're recognized.
Gene Irwin, Town Meeting, Precinct 9. Respectfully, Mr. Moderator, I don't think this article is ready for prime time. If it's okay, I think it smells fishy. If you go back to the original article, 15, in our warrant book, originally that article would give the town permission to take every single inch of privately owned property, and there's nothing we could do. I'm reading this new article, and it mentions a 6-unit building. What's going on here? You know, when we just passed the other thing up there on Brush Hill Road for those 30-some-odd units, we knew what was going on. This thing here, to me, smells awful fishy. If the town has a whole bunch of abandoned easements, why can't they list them for us and bring them to the spring meeting? I strongly recommend we send this back. Thank you.
might I suggest, was there a question there, which would be, if you just bear with me, why is the verbiage in here, except with respect to real estate property that is located in the business district and/or which is a multifamily dwelling consisting of more than 6 units? Why is that exception there? Might be a question?
Yes. What is the 6-unit referenced or proposed to be referenced?
Katie Collins, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As we said at the beginning, the modifications that we're seeking are intended to narrow the scope of the authorization, and it's at the request of many town meeting members, some of whom expressed concern about large projects to us. So we don't want to carve out, we're trying to carve out those large projects that people express some concern about. We didn't want to carve out a 3-family house, but a much larger development, such as an apartment complex, such as a condominium building, that are, you know, in some ways we might analogize them to a commercial project because it's a much bigger scale in terms of cost, in terms of size, that those would be appropriate to come back and seek approval from town meeting in order to accept an easement for those properties. But for the routine, whether it's a single-family home or a 2- or 3-family home, we wanted to have the authorization rest with the Board of Selectmen for those properties, because that's the majority of the properties in town, and the large projects generate a lot of interest, and we believe this would be the appropriate place to come and have them addressed. So it's the Board of Selectmen trying to respond to concerns that were raised by town meeting members. We tried to narrow what was originally a very broad article, albeit one that is based on articles that appear regularly in warrants in other towns. We're trying to respond to what we're hearing from the people that we represent, and from you yourselves who are representing people and bringing their concerns to us and to town meeting. So that's what this is about. We just tried to carve out what we thought town meeting might want to hear more about. We think you might be more interested in acting on an easement relating to a large commercial project or a large residential project rather than Mrs. Critchlow's backyard easement. Those are probably better to leave with the Board of Selectmen and let us deal with the more routine matters and let town meeting deal with the bigger projects. That's the reason for it.
Thank you. Ma'am, do you wish to be recognized? You are recognized.
Thank you. My name is Frances Boyle. I'm Precinct 9. I have a couple questions. Excuse my ignorance. The routine matters that you just spoke of, can you make me understand that a little bit better? I'm struggling with where this would be an advantage, the taking or the acceptance of an easement.
So is there another question I can record and make sure it's addressed? I'll make sure that is addressed.
I have a couple, but it depends on what the answer to the first one is.
Okay. Mr. Lynch, you recognized. I believe Mr. Lynch addressed it, but he could clarify it a little.
And I'll just talk from here, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Sure. So on the routine basis of us carrying out our construction projects, as we go down the road and we build the roadway, we put our curbing in and we put our sidewalks in, as we get the water to drain properly down the road, there are going to be changes of grade. They're going to reverberate across that layout to the back of sidewalk. And that's at the very boundary between where the town owns the roadway layout, called the right-of-way, and what becomes private property into a person's front yard. And things like sidewalks or walkways, from the sidewalk to people's front doors, landscaping, transitions of flower beds and shrubberies and grass yard areas, and driveway transitions, providing vehicular movement in and out of the yard, oftentimes, regularly, goes beyond the town's right-of-way, which we have a right to occupy and perform work in. What we have been doing on a regular basis is knocking on the doors and speaking with homeowners and seeking permission. This is as a department level, construction people, even our contractors, knocking on the doorways, seeking out the permission, quote-unquote permission, from a homeowner to carry out these various improvements on private property, some of which is successful, some of which could be unsuccessful and results in some controversy. With an easement well put in place as these things arise, get on a selectman's agenda, we're talking at most in the summertime a 2-week delay to get acted upon, as opposed to waiting till the next town meeting to get acted upon. So as we bring those through on the more controversial matters, they would go to the selectmen. In the end, there's no agreement reached and someone says, look, I want compensation for that, this amendment to the article that's before you now prevents that. That brings that back to town meeting, where a full-blown easement, where consideration is paid either through a negotiated fee that the town meeting appropriates money for, or in the end, if there is no agreement, that the town can come in through town meeting process and take by eminent domain. Those are extreme circumstances. I've been in this business for 20 years, and short of roadway widenings, I've never been involved in a eminent domain taking. We're not talking about acquiring people's entire properties or even a substantial part of their front yards. We're talking transition areas, typically 2, 3, 4 feet. In some rare occasions where grades change a lot, it could extend 10 feet in someone's front yard. But that's all we're looking at. And in the end, all we're looking to do is indemnify the town by having an instrument in place, and moreover is to protect the homeowner by having an instrument in place that everybody can rely on, as opposed to what we've been doing, and that's knocking on doors.
Thank you. I have a question to your explanation. So if in some cases, as you stated, the improvements were not accepted by the homeowners, then apparently that becomes a position of contention. What the property owner believes is obviously not an improvement. And if the DPW is an employment agency of the town, doesn't that leave the property owner a little bit to the disadvantaged? And in a transition, my second question is, transitioning off a roadway, doesn't the Massachusetts State Building Code prevent moving water to any other property?
No, actually, on the contrary, the Mass General laws allow you to put your water onto somebody else's property, and that's why there's a court system to figure out what those damages are worth. You can put your water where you want. It may not be the neighborly thing to do, but you can, in fact, divert it to a neighbor.
If I could,
We're
I'd
off-
like to
we're off topic on
interject
that.
for the purpose of moving this meeting along. I'd like to clarify, I think with the point you're getting to, Mr. Lynch, if in the process of that negotiation with the homeowner is not comfortable and will not allow you that easement, what happens to the homeowner? If they don't agree, then it doesn't happen, is that correct? Or would you have to take some other process?
As it exists right now, they could come to the Board of Selectmen as a sounding board, but ultimately would need to come to town meeting to have that concern for an easement and that authority formally put in place. By this article that's before you, if passed, it would allow that homeowner to come to the Board of Selectmen and to negotiate and to get an easement resolved at a board meeting. And that would be the end of it. That would be the solution to it. And if in the end, if there was still disagreement and it resulted in some financial reward or some financial fee, then that would still have to come back to
But
town
I
meeting.
think the nature, the pertinent point here is, this doesn't allow now you to take anything from the homeowner. It only allows you to accept after you've negotiated a fair,
Something they're
both
willing.
parties agreed to.
It formalizes what we've been doing, is when we knock on that door and we get that, sure, that sounds like a great idea, we can put an instrument in place that the selectmen can sign.
Okay.
And my final question is, why is roadway accepted, but yet vehicle passage is not? I'm still unclear on that. And if this has so many tremendous advantages, why is the 6-family the litmus test?
I'll try to answer that, and if I can't, I think Mr. Flynn will step up. I think a roadway has a very defined purpose, meaning within the general law, and that's for passage and repassage of vehicles on a multiple party basis. The vehicle I think that we're referring to here for passage is that if I need to get my equipment into the backyard area in order to maintain a drain area that's out in the back, it allows me to negotiate an easement for me to bring my equipment in and out for the purposes of maintaining those improvements.
Thank
Is that
you.
right, Mr. Flynn?
Thank you for that clarification. And then why finally, again, and I know I apologize, it's been asked and answered, but I'm still unclear on the answer. why then is it only for the multifamily dwellings?
That I'm going to stay away from. I think I understand it. but it's-
Thank you, Mr. Lynch.
Yeah, thank you.
Conlon, you're recognized.
The concerns that were expressed by a number of town meeting members related to a particular project, which is a large development. We are trying to address that by saying, as I said before, that we do have some limited number of 4 or 5 family, 6 family homes. Primarily, it's the 2 or 3 family homes that we don't, by saying a multifamily residence, we wanted to just make it the larger projects that was generating the concern about this article. So I think that's, I'm not sure if I'm being clear enough, but we're trying to carve out single-family homes, 2-family homes, 3-family homes. Let the board of, a homeowner who wants to give an easement to the town, whether it's a water line or a sewer line, let the Board of Selectmen deal with that. Let town meeting deal with the larger projects that seem to be generating some concern about this authorization to the Board of Selectmen, because those are big projects that do generate a lot of interest and a lot of concern. So that's the reason we picked this. If we just said multifamily, then possibly a person who owns a 2-family home who wanted to give an easement to the town for a sewer line would have to come to town meeting. We think that's more appropriate, rather than bogging town meeting down with that, we think that's more appropriate to send to the Board of Selectmen. And if a large development is looking to give an easement to the town, let's let town meeting weigh in on that and make the decision. That's why
thank you.
That's the 6 units.
Thank you. Thank you.
What percentage of residents in Milton are
Ma'am,
6-family? I'm sorry.
So I'm going to, no, don't sit down, relax. I'm going to allow you one more question for the purpose of moving on.
That's it? One more question. What percentage of homes in Milton are 6-family?
What? Oh, what, okay, that would meet this exception.
I'm sorry,
Gotcha.
what percentage?
6 to,
I don't have that information handy. I know that when we were looking at a few months ago when the board was looking at the policy for multifamily homes to handle water billing in a different manner so that it would be handled in a more equitable manner. The list that we had from the DPW was that there were a couple of 5-family homes, a couple of 6-family homes. I don't have the specific information available tonight. We could get that information to you, but I think it's a very, very small number. But
That wouldn't surprise me.
But that's why we went with that number. It was based on having seen that recently in the context of the multifamily water billing.
Thank you for your patience and your information.
thank you. Ms. McGettrick, do you wish to be recognized? You're recognized.
Just briefly, the discussion has gone, in my opinion anyway, way beyond the original purposes for this article. And it did have something to do with the temple development initially, because when we finalized the permit for that development, we included a requirement that there be an easement granted by the owner to the town so that the water line could be maintained by the town after it was constructed, which was a request by the DPW. That's the way they wanted it done. So we wrote it into the permit, and then the problem was that because the permit had that requirement in it, in order to record, we needed to have the easement. But we couldn't get the easement from the town because you had to go to town meeting to get an easement, or so it was explained to us at the time. Now, there are many other particular situations DPW deals with for small easements, but the main point of this article is supposed to be acceptance of an easement from a landowner who wishes to give the easement. It's not about taking something that someone doesn't want to give. I mean, that, just to put it in the simplest terms. And with the amendments, the article does seem to now say that. So I don't think there's any danger in it. I would ask that the town meeting pass the article so that we can properly record the easement which the temple wants to give to the town. I was the attorney for the temple in the permit process. And it's going to be, it may be an annual article. We'll be looking at it again. But because it's been narrowed now in scope, I don't see any danger to any landowner in the way this article is worded. And I would ask the town meeting vote yes on this.
Okay, folks. I see one more person waiting to speak. I'm going to recognize that person. We're going to hear the Warrant Committee's recommendation. We're taking this to a vote. Yes, ma'am, you're recognized.
Marie Theodot, 9th Precinct, 46 Clifton Road. I still believe that it's actually given unilateral authorization for someone's property. And if it's only for the temple, then be more specific. And it's not. I don't believe it is. I still think that this article does not actually support what I believe is another intent for things that are coming down the line. I don't believe that this article should be supported.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes, the position of the Warrant Committee and the motion to amend.
The Warrant Committee supports this revised recommendation, and just wanted to say that the reason we support this is because it requires the voluntary cooperation of the property owner. And so that's, I get the last word, that's the last word. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion to amend that will require a majority vote. All those in favor of the motion to amend say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion to amend carries. Now we need a 2/3 vote. Does anyone wish to speak to the main article? I honestly think we've done that. Thank you. All those in favor now, and this was just, I explained the mechanics for this before because it was a motion to amend. All those in favor of the motion, which is now a change requiring 2/3 vote, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. No. I declare a 2/3 vote. Article 16. To see if the town will vote pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5B, to establish a special purpose stabilization fund for the purposes of balancing the general fund budget, and to act on anything related thereto. It is submitted by the Board of Selectmen, and it is recommended the town vote pursuant to Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 5B, to establish a special purpose stabilization fund for the purposes of balancing the general fund. This will require a majority vote, and I recognize the chair of the Warrant Committee, Mr. Hayes, to explain.
Okay, so Ted Hayes, chair of your Warrant Committee. I'll be brief. This, I'll try to. This got put at the end of the warrant because I don't think it's hard, and I hope it's not controversial. It's the shortest article in the warrant, and it only has 3 commas, and I wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole, believe me. So what is this? It's proposing a special fund, revenue fund that the town doesn't have. It's a savings account. It's a short-term parking place for money. What kind of money? Don't we always spend every cent we have? Well, yes, we do, because there's no place to put any extra for use in a year or 2 down the line. So you could maybe call this a budget stabilization account. This will not substitute for or detract from steady contributions to the general stabilization fund, but funds may be deposited and withdrawn from it without causing our rating agencies to raise their eyebrows. I spoke with the associate director at Standard & Poor's who rates the town of Milton's credit. Other towns use similar funds. Activity is expected. Will we use it? I don't know. It would depend on the circumstances. What kind of circumstances might that be? In the past, before this past spring, when the House and the Senate got together and made a final determination on what local aid would be, often a little trickle would follow the basic determination, and this often came after budgets were set, and sometimes it was nice to be able to allocate it to some department. There was always somebody willing to take it, but sometimes if the budget were set and this was a windfall, this would be a place you could put it for help balancing the following year's budget. One could contemplate putting an excess, if there is such a thing, of free cash there. at any rate, it's a tool that I think would be helpful to the warrant committee. I think would be helpful to the town. I think it's a tool that can enable fiscal restraint. And so I think for that purpose, I'd appreciate it if you voted yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak to this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the recommendation of the warrant committee say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. It's unanimous. Before I entertain a motion to adjourn, I'd just like to remind you, the planning board would like this to be filled out, the master planning committee, and you can drop it in the box at the table. Thank you. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved, seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.